Admiral David Simpson is one of our nation's preeminent cybersecurity officials. Admiral Simpson is the chief of the Federal Communications Commission's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. There he oversees the Commission's Homeland Security, emergency management, cybersecurity, disaster preparedness, and so forth. He previously was the Vice Director of Defense Information Systems Agency, where he's responsible for planning and providing global communications for the defense industry. So please join me in welcoming the Admiral.
Thanks. Well, thanks so much for that kind introduction, and it's great to follow such an august panel, several of which whom I know and have worked with, but one in particular I'll shout out to Suzanne Vautrinot, who was a fellow cyber warfighter with me alongside while she was leading the Air Force fight, and I was there in the joint fight, the Navy fight, and it's great to see Suzanne again. I'd like to kind of pick up on a piece of where that panel left off, and that's really how do we organize across the private sector for this really tough fight. And I think, Dave, it's great to distill risk management down to there's somebody out there who wants your stuff. And if you can't get your head around that, you're not going to be successful with cybersecurity, because that's its essence is exactly what the problem is. And increasingly, the range of access that adversaries have expands daily. In the military, we called it attack surface. And as more and more of our lives, of our work environments, of our banking, of our transportation, of our medical, in fact, now is interdependent on communications, and that communication shares a common protocol, the internet protocol, that attack surface continues to grow and grow. The right answer is not to say, stop increasing that attack surface. We're not going to include IT in our daily lives. It has been a wonderful boon to our economy, a wonderful contribution to all of our lives, although sometimes when that smartphone goes off at 8 in the evening or later, you just wonder, is it a boon or a curse? But in all seriousness, it has allowed us to be connected in a way that we would never have dreamed of 5, 10, 15 years ago. And our nation leads that. And we lead it because we have, over decades, found that right balance between privacy, security, and innovation. And we haven't let a compulsion around security keep us from innovating and bringing out new things, new functions, and trying it. So we very much, as we go forward, want to preserve that innovation on-ramp, continue to have this be a vibrant sector, and a sector that's led, first and foremost, from the commercial side, because that's where the balance can best be achieved in the capital that should go towards new functionality and the capital that should go towards securing that new functionality. In that, however, there are a number of key areas that the market alone won't naturally cover, and there are elements of communications that have to be there all the time, every time, under the greatest situations of duress. One of those that I work with every day is 911. You know, there's just not a lot of profit in the 911 world. But 911 has to be there. We expect it to be there when that challenge is ours. Emergency alerting, another one, disaster communications in general. We are seeing some disturbing trends as we continue that road march towards convergence. Without going into all the details, we recently had a major 911 outage that impacted 7 states, including the entire state of Washington, all because a single database in Colorado failed. So it's a great example of new technology, bringing in new functionality in the 911 world, wonderful. But new technology also allows us to be more efficient, and if we optimize just around lowering operational costs, that doesn't always translate into increased resiliency, increased reliability. So we need to be careful as we go forward and identify those areas. Corporately, the market does a very nice job of punishing companies that don't do that well and rewarding companies that do that well. But where there are areas that the market falls short in ensuring that, that's where we believe that the government team has a special role to make sure that we shine a flashlight and ensure that we don't go backwards in our expectations for low to no fail things. So at the FCC, we've been working for some time now on what are the elements of greatest risk with regard to the internet. And we have a federal advisory committee called a FACA, called the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability group. And it, in CISRIC 3, which is the acronym for it, worked on internet hardening measures. And it did so with the industry itself and said, hey, communications industry, what are the greatest causative factors systemically across the backbone of the internet that lead to DDoS attacks? And the group brought up bots and consequently brought together what was pulled into something called the Anti-Botnet Code of Conduct. It brought in the need to use DNS, domain name system security, BGP, Border Gateway Protocol security, as well as a couple of other detailed protocols that, should the entire industry make a commitment towards implementing, would significantly harden and improve the defendability of the entire industry. So that really describes the technical detail in which the Commission approaches cyber at scale. But then it also describes where we believe the answers are. That the answers aren't in government prescriptively telling industry what to do in this space. It's really working together with industry to understand the risk and then take actions upon that. So that as we approach the next CISRIC, CISRIC 4, about a year ago, we said, well, what's next? What's missing at this point? And what was really missing was the measurement of that. We understood that industry committed to what the right technical solutions were, but there were a number of examples in the 911 world where industry had provided best practices, but then didn't follow through and actually implement the best practices within their companies. And we said, as we go forward, this risk is not one that industry alone should make the decision on. That the accepted risk on the behalf of consumers, the accepted risk when it comes to elements of communications that are low to no fail elements, got to work all the time, every time when it's there, that appreciation of risk needs to be shared with the communications sector and the government and consumer, not just individual consumers, but consumer companies of communication services. So when we charted CISRIC 4, we generated a working group that was going to look at that element in a deep dive way with the communication sector. And fortunately, right about that time, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, had done great work, we think, across the internet ecosystem in developing something called the Cybersecurity Framework. And hopefully I'm not the first speaker today that has mentioned the framework. I'd be very surprised if Phil Schneck didn't tell you how important that was. And we think it's hugely important. So we worked with the communication sector and said, let's take the framework, which is a skeleton, a structure, and let's now begin to optimize it for the communications sector, optimize it for each of the subsectors within the communications sector. There was a little bit of a, do we really trust each other on this one when we first started out? And Chairman Wheeler helped us work through the trust. He described a seesaw. He said, if you don't, we will. And we kind of know the 80%, but we'd really much rather have 95%, and we think you're much better industry in determining what the right organization would be to better understand risk and then appreciate it and share it. And we call that the new paradigm. And the chairman challenged the communications sector and said, look, I'm ready to regulate different in this space. Over to you all. But there's a couple of things that have to be there with the new paradigm. And the first, it's got to be measurable. If you're out there doing risk assessments and making decisions about risk for each of your companies, great. But we've got to see that at some level, at the government level, to appreciate, is it good enough for the goods and services that you're selling? Second, it has to communicate down into your organization. It's got to be something you actually do. It can't be like some of the 911 best practices that great work was done and then there was not follow through internally. In order for that to happen, the cybersecurity framework then needs to communicate into the C-ring, into the C-suite. And if that risk assessment isn't in traditional risk terms that chief financial officers understand and that can communicate to a CEO or a COO, and in fact motivate the investments required to close readiness gaps, then we really haven't done our job with this working group. And the final area that it needs to speak to is to each other. It needs to speak to the different sectors and the different players, as well as the consumer organizations. And I think it was great that the example of Target was brought up earlier, and I'll just in a nutshell use it to describe what that communication means to me. That Target had a cyber readiness level that was really up about here. It wasn't bad. They had bought the right tools. I don't think they had a good people plan on how to use those tools. They outsourced some things shouldn't have been outsourced, and they missed it. But their cyber readiness was up here. The HVAC company, and I'll not use the name, but it was earlier identified, had a cyber readiness level that was down there. And I think if you really asked them beforehand and asked them, hey, are you guys experts in cyber? They said, cyber? What's a cyber? We do heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. That's our thing. Those two companies, when they entered into a business agreement to have the HVAC company provide remote monitoring for the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, never had a meaningful discussion about cyber between them. And Target had no clue that essentially entering into a business relationship that had a connection between their information environments that went all the way to the point of sale, what that was exposing Target to. In a fully realized implementation of the cybersecurity framework between players in the market, I expect that it will facilitate the discussions in business relationships as well as in other kinds of service level agreements and interconnectivity between companies, so that they'll be able to say, okay, what part of this do you have? What part of this do I have? If your risk is down there and I want to do business with you, either I got to close the gap by paying for it, or continue to the contract is you got to find a third party that's good at cyber so that we can close the gap. So the cybersecurity framework needs to facilitate those kind of meaningful discussions around the 5 categories of the framework. Identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover. And you really need to think about all 5 of those elements, because there needs to be a part of every business that has an information component to their business that they in fact are ready in each of those 5 areas, and know where they're good organically, where they're outsourcing that and where they're relying on their partners for elements of that. So this last year, we're well underway with Working Group 4. On that CISR 3 item, the elements to harden the internet, we have asked each of the players, the major players in the communications sector, to meet with us 1v1 and just tell us about their implementation of the hardening measures. How far along are they? Have they encountered some barriers that are keeping them from getting to 100%? Are their best practices that if it was more broadly known, we would get more of the companies further along? And that's been very fruitful and has illuminated a couple of things where, for example, in wireless, something called RPKI, or the ability to share protected credentials. Wireless said, it's easy, we're done. We change our infrastructure out every couple of years, 100%. We're just waiting on those wireline guys who, it's a very different challenge there. You got a lot of equipment that will take years to completely deploy there. So we're getting into that level of dialogue with our partners that, again, it's not our telling them what to do, but them helping us understand and us helping focus on the long-term goal. Information sharing, situational awareness has to get better, and I kind of put it at this: that we succeed in the new paradigm if, when a company in the communications sector gets attacked, the rest get better. If that doesn't happen, if a company gets attacked and everyone else says, woohoo, it wasn't me, look at that guy, it's heck to be you, then we haven't done this right. So in order for that one person gets attacked, one company gets attacked and the rest get better, you need to have information sharing. It needs to be credible. It needs to get to the point where it's often machine to machine. The communications ISAC is not at all where the financial sector ISAC is. And we're working right now with our partners in the sector to determine, is that the right model? Is the ISAC embedded in the DHS NKIC? Hopefully you heard what that center is today. Or is there something that would be more meaningful for companies in the communication sector at a lower level to support that machine-to-machine sharing between communications companies and being able to respond to requests from other sector ISACs like the FS ISAC? In our Technology Advisory Council, we've asked them to work on some long lead hardware, software, and firmware cyber risk reduction efforts. And in our Consumer Advisory Council, we've really asked them to start to distill what are the essential elements of security and privacy that consumers care about. Let's express that in a list of questions that consumers can expect to see and have that translate across every mobile device that they might pick up, and then share that with the TAC so that as we go forward, consumers don't have to relearn those questions for every new device, which they have to do today, or in every new application, that they can be asked those questions once in a consistent manner, and then have the technology then in a Rosetta Stone kind of way translate the consumer choices around security and privacy into the settings for their devices. So the last element of our program is really focusing on human factors. And invariably, when I was in the Department of Defense and in the year that I've been at the FCC, when you look at a major failure, you tracked it back 9 times out of 10, not to the hardware that they didn't buy or did buy, not to the software that they had or didn't have. It's the workforce. And 95% of the investment, in some companies it's greater, 95% of the investment in cyber goes to what? Workforce. It's the people. Yet that's where the greatest degree of variability is in the capability that separates a company that's good at cyber and a company that's not good at cyber. And we still have a lot of upside to developing programs that lessen the variability of skills and increase the professionalization of the cyber workforce. So I'm glad that we mentioned starting in elementary school, middle school, high school. We need to carry that through college, but we also need to recognize that it's not just a cyber dude. There are 38 different occupational specialties within cyber that NIST, again, has categorized, and that's been in place for 4 years. Yet in most companies, they still have not heard of that and are looking at buying a cyber dude instead of organizing a program and working with other service providers to ensure that they've covered the range of cyber. Cross-sector coordination, very important. And this year, we just recently worked with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the White House and established the first ever Inter-Regulators Cyber Forum. And we think that's a very important thing to get the regulators in charge of different sectors talking to each other about cyber to ensure that we're not duplicating to those activity, that we're not creating dual liabilities where they don't need to be there for regulated entities, but more importantly, so that we can synchronize activity and we're not just playing whack-a-mole where in one sector they take a significant step in cyber only to have the adversary move to the other sector and get in through the HVAC company. So that first meeting was very fruitful, and it was very interesting to see the very prescriptive way in which the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, approach defining what right looks like in cyber for their regulated entities, where the FDA was with regard to medical IT, which was still a little more in the workshop phase, and then we believe that our right approach to cyber is not prescriptive like in a nuclear situation, but is much more, hey, we're good at cyber when our companies are good at cyber. How do we facilitate them being really good at cyber? Let me close with measurability, accountability, and risk management, because that really is the essence of what we think needs to happen as we go forward to determine whether or not this new paradigm is going to be successful or not. Metrics, measurements that business executives and boards understand, as I talked about before, need to be developed. We've gotten to the point with the working group where we're feeling really good that they've defined how the framework and the 5 categories apply from the CSO on down. They're now in that period of time where they're defining what those metrics mean up into that C-suite. And so we're anxiously waiting to see how that pans out and have Chairman Wheeler meeting with a number of CEOs in the sector to help gauge whether or not we're making progress in that. The CISREC Working Group 4 recommendations on voluntary mechanisms for that macro level assurance based on the NIST framework are due in March. They're beginning to write up their subsector reports right now, and we're very much looking forward to that. We are now turning into what constitutes are we there or not, and we really believe that it's important that there be a carrot, a pot of gold at the end of the tough rainbow that we've laid out ahead for industry in this. And I think it really goes like this. If you're engaged in the paradigm in that measurable, accountable, business-driven engagement, and you're regularly sharing with us what are the accepted risks, what are the challenges, then there's a presumption that you're really exercising due diligence in this arena, and that if you get attacked, and I loved what Zan Vautrinot described, the victims are victims in this. There's an adversary that is looking to attack. It's not just a company's irresponsible. That said, there needs to be an accountability, but we believe that if then there's this a developed part of the ecosystem that one company gets attacked and the rest get better because of that attack, then you're really in that new paradigm, and there's a presumption from the FCC standpoint that that attack does not need significant additional enforcement follow-up. If, however, your company has said, hey, I'm on my own, I don't want to use that NIST framework thing, and I've got my own plan for how I'm going to address risk, then I believe that we need to understand that, and should an attack occur for a company that's entirely solo on this, then we would need to have a different discussion about, well, did you have a good plan and just not implement controls, or did you just not have a good plan to begin with? So we're working on that piece now to ensure that at the end of this, we aren't turning every attacked company into a victim, but we're truly developing an ecosystem that gets better from the information gained from any single attack. So let me go ahead and wrap it up there, and I don't know if time for a question or. Okay, great. Yeah, I'd be happy to take your questions. Yes, sir.
You've been describing these programs to implement better levels of cybersecurity in the industry. What kind of compliance do you get? Is everybody eager to join and enthusiastically do that? And how do you check up on it pre-attack? Do you have some sort of an audit, a cybersecurity audit for the companies?
Yeah, it's a great question because, well, I mentioned the CISRIC, the FACA. There have been working groups in the CISRIC that have developed what we call happy talk. The industry all loves the CISRIC, right? Hey, there's a problem, don't develop regulations for that, bring it to the CISRIC, and we'll work on the problem, give you a recommendation, and if it's really hard, we'll bump it to the next CISRIC. That's not going to cut it here, and I am confident that the industry partners that have been active in this are sincerely wanting to get it right, not just because they know that if we don't get to 95%, that we'll regulate 80%, but because there's a win-win in this. There's a real business imperative for getting this right, particularly among the communications sector companies. If America begins to lose confidence in the communications sector, that banking with mobile devices, procuring from retail companies over the net, putting any kind of intellectual property out there isn't secure, they stand to have significant harm to their bottom line. So I believe first and foremost is the alignment of those motivations. Our motivation to, as the regulator, see the market continue to grow and thrive and be a source of national prosperity, but also each of the individual companies saying that this is in their best interest. With regard to audit, I'm a big believer in audit around cybersecurity, and I started when I was in DoD using the financial IT audit process that was in place, the SSA 16, and using that to build around that towards a international standard, ISO 27001, and having that be an included part of the audit that we did at the Defense Information Systems Agency. That said, I don't think that an audit requirement that is established at the federal level that companies then have to comply with is the best way to go about this. I think that companies themselves would be well advised as they work their risk programs across the full range of risk, that they should develop an audit paradigm for cyber, begin to use the framework to determine, well, what are the elements within that, establish controls, and then present that to a third party that is skilled in cyber to, in fact, assess whether or not they're closing the gaps or not. But I think that should be done company by company. I think that as companies work increasingly with the insurance industry and with other instruments of finance, that expectations that there'll be some kind of an audit program will continue to increase. Does that answer the question? Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.